Late one morning, Frank the Arlesdale Railway diesel returned to the yards at Arlesborough. He'd had a busy day so far, helping the workmen, but I'm afraid to say he really wasn't feeling too well. His engine had been running a bit rough for most of the morning. As he entered the yard, Frank spotted Douglas shunting a flat car onto the siding next to the Arlesdale Railway's tracks. Frank frowned as he spotted the locomotive perched upon it. Then, he remembered something he'd overheard a few days ago about a new engine being purchased.
Would I be right in saying that's our new engine, sir?
Frank asked, as the small controller strode up to him.
Indeed, Frank. We'll need your help to get her unloaded.
Certainly, sir.
Frank looked closely at the new engine. She had an unusual cab, with the floor only inches above the rails. Standing out against her green paint, a brass and red nameplate showed her name to be Olivia.
You were built recently, weren't you?
How did you know that?
Well, I can't see any rivets on you. I'm guessing welded construction?
Yes. I was built for an estate railway in 2006. It closed.
Oh.
Frank replied, understandingly. Dinna fuss yourself, Olivia. You're in good buffers with Frank. With that, Douglas departed.
Alright, Olivia, let's get some rails under your wheels.
About an hour later, the workman and Frank had gotten Olivia onto the Arlesdale Railway tracks and had quickly tested her systems. It looks like you're ready to go, Olivia.
I see.
I'm glad to hear it.
Olivia looked over to see a tall, well-dressed gentleman approaching her. He introduced himself as Mr. Andrew Duncan, the controller of the Arlesdale Railway.
I'm glad to see you arrived safely, Olivia. Now, I can imagine that what you're used to may be a bit different to the way we do things here.
I suppose so, sir.
It wouldn't surprise her, Olivia thought. Everything else was different, anyway.
As such, I'd like you to double-head Mike's next train with him to learn the line.
All right.
Olivia replied, wondering who Mike was. Mike, as Olivia learnt about 10 minutes later, was a long, red tender engine. He seemed to be in a bit of a grumpy mood as he backed down onto his coaches.
Great. Coaches again. Who are you?
I'm Olivia. Are you Mike? Mr. Duncan said I was to double-head your train with you.
You are? What are you doing there, then? You'd better run up in front of me quickly.
As Olivia moved off to change tracks, Mike glanced back at his driver.
Driver, how long before we have to leave?
A couple of minutes. Mike looked forward at where Olivia had switched over to his line. It would take about that long for Olivia to back down and be coupled up, he thought. If they were going to leave on time, they'd be cutting it fine. Olivia was quickly coupled up to Mike, and the two engines departed.
Come on, quickly now. Come on, quickly now.
Mike chuffed as the train got underway.
I'm coming along. Why are you rushing?
We were a bit late leaving. If we're to get to Bridge Street on time, we're going to have to make up a couple of minutes.
On time? You mean you run to a timetable here?
Mike frowned, taken aback by the question.
What? Of course we run to a timetable here. You're telling me you've not used a timetable before?
Well, not really.
Olivia replied weakly. She then explained to Mike that on her estate railway, she and her friend Jake had only run when their owner, Sir Walter, had needed them to.
Well, then you'll need to get used to it,
Mike said when she'd finished. Olivia didn't reply. This, she thought, must have been one of the differences that Mr. Duncan had mentioned. Both engines worked hard, and they reached Bridge Street station right on time. A short while later, they reached the passing loop just down from Arlesdale. Faced with the red signal, Mike began to brake the train.
What's going on? Have we lost a coach?
Surely they weren't meant to stop here, Olivia thought. They were nowhere near a station.
No, it's just a red signal.
A red signal? You mean that thing up on that post?
Mike couldn't believe what he was hearing.
Yes, that is a signal. Are you seriously telling me you haven't seen one of those before?
We didn't have them on my old railway.
Didn't have them? What sort of railway doesn't have signals?
There were only 2 of us. We coordinated our movements by radio.
Right.
A moment later, Bert passed with the ballast train. Then the signal cleared. As they departed, Mike couldn't help thinking that Olivia had a lot to learn, and quickly. The rest of their run went uneventfully, and they arrived at Pilgodred on schedule. Olivia was glad when they stopped. She wasn't used to running such long distances.
We do get a bit of rest before we head back, don't we?
We're due to depart in 10 minutes.
Olivia was dismayed. Her wheels and side rods were aching terribly, and it would take longer than that for her to recover.
Only 10 minutes?
That's long enough for us to have a drink and run around our train.
I suppose so.
Olivia replied quietly as she was turned. Further down the line, Frank was taking a works train. The extension to Pilgodred had been completed in 1983. As well as connecting the Arlesdale Railway to the old city, it had also provided them access to the old mines which had once been served by the Sodor Railway. Right now, however, the points to one of these mines had failed and was in need of repairs. The workmen would have just enough time to finish the job before Olivia and Mike passed by on their return run. But without any warning, a loud bang sounded out. Frank suddenly felt weak, barely able to move. The weight of his train dragged him to a halt.
Oh, this is the last thing we need.
Frank's driver gave him a quick inspection, then stepped around in front of the diesel. That's torn it, Frank. Your cylinder gasket's blown. You shan't be pulling any more trains today. What about us? We've got to get these points fixed, asked one of the workmen. I'll get on the radio. There may be another engine nearby who can help. When the news of Frank's predicament reached Pilgodred, Mike was rather annoyed.
So we've got to rescue Frank and pull our train. Like that's not going to cause delays.
Olivia glanced backwards.
I'll go ahead and rescue Frank. You don't need me to pull this train.
But you're supposed to be learning the line.
Olivia paused for a moment. Mike's attitude on the run-up had made it pretty clear that he considered her more of a hindrance than a help, due to her lack of knowledge.
I know when I'm not wanted, Mike.
What? No, I didn't mean it like that.
Don't worry, I'm used to it by now. Station Marsha, tell Control look after Frank.
Before Mike had a chance to reply, Olivia departed.
She's used to it by now. What did she mean by that?
Beats me, Mike. A short while later, Olivia reached Frank. The little diesel grinned at the sight of her.
Am I glad to see you?
Olivia smiled weakly.
I'm glad I could help. Are we taking you to...
We're not going to have time to repair the broken points now. You'll have to take me back to Arlesburg.
Okay.
Olivia whistled, then began pushing Frank and his train back down the line. They soon reached a passing track and stopped to wait for Mike to pass. The red engine did so a few minutes later. Once he was out of the way, Olivia ran around her train, then set off for Arlesborough. Her side rods and wheels were aching, but she put in her best effort. Sir Walter had taught her to always do her best, and she wasn't going to give that up. Not now, not ever. At the other end of the train, Frank couldn't help feeling a little impressed. Olivia wasn't exactly the most cheerful of engines, he thought, but her work ethic was superb. Eventually, they reached Marthwaite, and Olivia glanced up as they took the passing siding.
The signal's red, which means we've got to stop.
With that, she gently braked the train to a halt. She was glad for the rest.
How long do these usually last?
Oh, well, it depends on where the other train is.
Frank frowned.
You sound like you're not used to them.
It's because I'm not. Mike told me all I know about them.
Olivia said, and she explained about her signal stop with Mike on the trip up. By the time she'd finished, Frank was looking flabbergasted and a little worried.
You've only ever seen one signal before, yet you ventured solo down the line to rescue me.
My driver was keeping an eye out as well, but it's just red for stop and green for go, isn't it?
Well, yes and no.
Frank was about to tell her about distant and home signals when another voice spoke up.
It sounds like your friend is a quick learner, Frank.
Thank you.
Olivia glanced over at the platform to see who had spoken, but none of the passengers were looking towards her. Looking to her left, all Olivia saw was a hill sloping upwards, with an old stone building on it which had some cars parked nearby.
Who was that?
Do you see that building over there with the smokestack?
That was that building? But buildings can't...
Olivia broke off, confusion overcoming her. All these new things, signals, working to a timetable, the new railway. It had been a lot for her to take in.
Too much. It's too much. All this.
Olivia! It's not the building talking.
It's alright, Olivia. I'm a steam engine. A stationary one, inside this mill building.
A steam engine?
Yes, I used to run the machinery in here to grind up flour and other grains. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you.
That's alright. It's just... I've had a lot to adjust to.
I understand. It's nice to meet you.
Before Olivia could reply, one of the Blister twins passed with the works train in the opposite direction. The signal cleared a moment later, and Olivia got her train underway. As the train moved off, Frank explained to Olivia that the old mill had been turned into a museum following its closure in 1964. They soon reached Arlesdale and stopped next to where the small controller was waiting.
Thank you, Olivia. You've helped us out of a nasty jam.
I'm glad to hear it, sir.
You'd better shunt Frank into the workshop. It's that small shed about half a mile up the line. Can I ask you to look after his trains for the rest of the day?
What sort of trains would those be, sir?
Works trains, mostly. I usually look after the maintenance here.
Olivia nearly smiled. At last, she thought. Something she knew.
I took those trains all the time on Sir Walter's estate. I'll do what I can.
For the rest of the day, Olivia helped the workmen, carrying them and their materials to where they were needed. They got the faulty points up in the mountains fixed, and she met the other engines too. It was early evening by the time Olivia finished the day's work. As she stopped for a red signal at Farquhar Road station, she noticed a bus parked nearby. He'd seen her too, and promptly introduced himself.
Good evening. My name's Bertie. You must be that new engine Rex told me about?
Olivia blinked, slightly taken aback by Bertie's cheery demeanour.
Oh, yes. My name's Olivia.
Pleased to meet you.
Do you work around here?
Oh, here, there and everywhere really. I'm a charter bus. Sodor touring coaches bought me about 15 years ago. There's a tour group arriving on Bert's train soon.
I see.
Silence fell for a moment, and Bertie looked closely at the little tank engine.
You'll be alright.
I'm sorry.
You don't need to worry about fitting in here if that's what's worrying you. I've known Rex, Bert, Mike, Jock, Frank and the Blister twins for about 10 years now. They're good engines, even if a couple of them are a little rough around the edges. Good friends too, and I'm sure they want to help you settle in.
Olivia looked closely at Bertie. That wasn't her only worry at the moment, but he wasn't to know that. He was trying to help her, and she did appreciate it. Olivia smiled, for the first time since she'd arrived on Sodor.
Thank you, Bertie.
A moment later, the line was clear, and Olivia departed. She soon arrived at the Arlesdale yards. As she passed the sheds, Mike looked over.
Something on your mind, Mike?
Rex asked.
You could say that.
Mike replied, and he told the other engines about what Olivia had said at Peel Godred. Rex looked at him sternly.
You weren't being rude to her, were you?
Well, not deliberately, but I was a bit annoyed. I mean, she didn't know what signals were, or about timetable running.
So, she's an hard worker. That's something we've all got in common, Mike.
Oh, I get that, Frank. But still, this Sir Walter could have taught her a little bit about what to expect here before sending her away. He must be fairly busy if he can't spare a moment to tell his engines what to expect.
Sir Walter Alworth was a good man, I'll have you know. It wasn't his fault he wasn't able to teach me those things.
Mike, Rex, and Frank looked over.
Olivia, I didn't realise you were there.
An awkward silence fell over the sheds for a moment.
Olivia, I am sorry. I didn't mean to upset you this morning.
I doubt he was that annoyed with you, Olivia. Passenger trains you usually get Mike in a grumpy mood.
Exactly, Rex. But can I ask, Olivia, what did you mean when you said you were used to being unwanted?
Olivia looked over at the other engines. She'd only just arrived and didn't really want to unload her problems on them. But then she remembered what Bertie had told her earlier.
Thank you, Mike. To be honest, I wasn't really that upset with you either. It's just that the whole thing happened so quickly.
What whole thing?
It just seems... One minute I was running trains for Sir Walter, then he...
He what?
Rex looked closely at Olivia. Judging by how she was speaking, he had a nasty feeling he knew where this was going.
Sir Walter passed away, didn't he?
Yes.
Olivia, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mike. You're right, Rex. Sir Walter passed away. Jake and I barely had time to come to terms with that before we were shipped off, a fortnight after Sir Walter's passing.
Only a fortnight? That's a bit abrupt.
Let's just say that Sir Walter's children weren't as enthusiastic about the railway as their father.
Olivia, if there's anything we can do...
Thank you, Mike.
Over the next few days, Olivia began getting used to life on the Arlesdale Railway. The other engines did what they could to help her settle in, and Olivia soon began to feel at home. As Bertie had said, they were good friends to have.